Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Retail Corner podcast. I am here with Shiraz Ritwik. He is the leader in growth for consumer goods as well as financial services for a company called LatentView. And welcome to the Retail Corner.
Thank you, Cole. Glad to be here.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So, to kind of kick off our conversation, Shiraz, could you share a bit about your journey? Like what led you to your current role in LatentView? Why'd you take that leadership position?
Certainly, Cole. I think it's been an interesting 2 decades and then some, but then I think everyone in the industry right now is 2 decades old, given that the industry itself is 2 decades old. But then I think where I started out was from the DNA of a consultant. Really, my first gigs were around actually looking at um, doing more supply chain and procurement analytics and leading projects where we were helping buyers figure out 30 to 35 billion dollars of a spend base and understand how they could bring it down by at least 10 to 12%, 15%, and really help organizations capture that cost reduction. So that that kind of set the base in me for a very action oriented mindset of how can we deliver things to our clients. So that really helped me to say, okay, can we look into various categories of spend and figure out very specific actions where we can introduce rate reductions or rationalize the demand. And it all
Right.
culminated in one financial services large investment bank. We walked in and we were looking at their office supplies spend, and I worked with a client where he was not very sure of how much of the demand could be rationalized. We were looking at like notebooks and staplers and other such things.
All the
And
stuff
so
that you don't think about throughout the day. Yeah.
exactly, and this may be
Huh.
farthest from analytics, but trust me, it comes back because
No, it's
we
okay.
got
It's okay.
one large room, and we got Office Max and Staples, and I think I'm not sure if WB Mason was also in the mix, but we got all of them to send in their notebooks, send in their three-pad ruled, however notebooks, their ballpoint pens, and everything else in one room. And then our client had his team kind of walk people through each of these options and say, okay, which ones are we going to stay with and which ones are we going to remove.
Oh, wow.
it
Like a
was it was a very protracted exercise, but it definitely resulted in rationalizing that demand. It created great alignment and adoption among people, which I'm going to come back to later. But
okay.
I think it allowed us to say, here are all the things we don't even need to bother with rates about because we're not going to be sourcing them anymore.
Right.
And that kind of set the foundation in me for saying, okay, here's how you can actually take a very soft skill like people and adoption and apply it to make your analytics value come to life.
Right. Well, I mean, so often when we're dealing with data and we're dealing with analytics, it's in theory. Uh, it's removed from us. And when you put the product actually in someone's hands, can make a difference. And so that's kind of cool. And so,
Absolutely.
like, given your significant background in analytics, like, how do you make those pipelines to be more efficient? How are you looking at things becoming automated? How are we working with those?
I think there's a lot of things that are happening with how analytics is being applied, especially in a consumer and retail context, but more broadly across all industries. Um, I think some of the things that are working for the organizations that are doing it right are they're always starting with the business problem, not necessarily with, oh my god, we have should we get onto Azure or GCP or AWS, but more about, okay, what's this going to bring us? And that laser focus on the goals, on revenue maximization or reaching more customers or reducing customer acquisition cost or churn, that is what sets the stage for a successful transformation initiative. And
Okay.
the next step, I would say the next step is to kind of prioritize ruthlessly and deliver on the low hanging fruit. So that really is about being able to say, okay, let's keep everything aside, solve for the 80/20, and push the remainder to the side. or push it to the nice to have bucket or to phase 2 or phase 3. Figure out what data is going to get you to 80% of the business value, and try and figure out what out of that is the most feasible to implement, because that'll get you your 6 week,
Mm.
12-week value in front of everyone. Once you've proved that, the rest of it goes back to the adoption, because then you have the momentum you need for adoption. And then you can really drive that change across the organization.
Yeah, because I would imagine so many people running around, they're trying to get a little bit of everything, and they end up with a whole lot of nothing. And so it's really it's kind of interesting to start with the end in mind. Of course, the old school Stephen Covey Seven Habits, and but to have the idea of, okay, how am I going to get to my goals? Using a focused tool rather than, I mean, stacking programs on top of each other and uh, just losing it all in the mix. That's
You're absolutely right, Cole, because once you lay out that objective of, okay, let's say it's going to be acquiring more customers, and that is what we're going to focus on
something
in
we
this part
all
of the
want to
project.
do. Yes.
Right. So then you take that, and then you figure out what is the best way to do that. Best in terms of time, in terms of feasibility, in terms of the people who can partner with you to make that potential realized. I think all of that kind of comes together, but you have to meld the man and machine to get the best result. So,
Sure.
right, because we were just talking about this convoluted, a tool for every problem, and then some tools which also don't address any problems, but they're also in there.
I've,
And
I've,
so
I've
it,
worked
it
with those. So like, why is this in the tech stack? Why is this? What does this do? Everyone agrees it's important, but for some reason it doesn't do anything. So
Yeah, and you know what, Cole? Sometimes what happens is we are always living in a changing world. So there are tools from the past. There's some companies, especially in the financial services world, we find that technologies from 20 years ago coexist with technologies that are going to be there tomorrow. So
absolutely,
it
yeah.
is
I've
important to know that you will never really rid yourself of that flux, but important to be kind of consolidating around the things that will bring future value as well.
I was working with a
Sorry, you were
client
going to
one
say.
time. I was working with a client one time where the instructions for one of their integrations was to basically power it down every night, wait a few moments, and then literally in the instructions it said, "Hope it comes back up." That's hope shouldn't be part. of, Hope shouldn't be part of the plan. So I thought that was interesting, but
Maybe we set up a
it's
little chapel on the side as well,
yes,
because
exactly,
who knows?
exactly. Just to take care of business as you need to. But okay, so let's get a retail focused question here. In retail,
Mhm.
there's so much data rolling around, and yeah, the problem is it'll sit in silos. It'll sit in sales, it sits in customer service, it sits all sorts of other places. How are you
Mhm.
dismantling silos? And like, that's a significant focus for everybody, but are you seeing that when you're dismantling silos? First of all, how are you dismantling those in a proper way? And then how does that speed up the leap from like data to insight?
That's a great question, because I think it is still in the realm of the art of the possible for a lot of companies. And we're really excited because we're being able to live that change for some of our clients whom we're working with on exactly this. But let me back up a little bit and acknowledge that this is really a burning platform across most industries. It's especially true for, I will actually include CPG within that space and say the retail CPG space, and that data ecosystem especially struggles with this. There are at
Really?
least three reasons. If you look at the sources of these data, let's say, you've got one, proliferation of external or third-party data providers. So you've got market insights being piped in from Circana, from Nielsen, Mintel. Second, you've got retailers and manufacturers coming up with their own data solutions as well. So retailers, especially like Walmart, have published Luminate. I think other large
Yeah.
retailers also have that on the way. Um, And they are constantly improving on what was once traditionally just POS data. They're actually loading on shopper insights. They're looking at cohorts of shoppers and understanding how they shop. Um, all of this is opening up a whole lot of potential. And then third, organizations themselves have a ton of internal data, which is like shipments, consumer tastes, preferences,
Sure.
liking versus hedonistic preferences. And then they have some insights organizations which try to make sense of all this and attempt a limited aggregation of this to come up with some insight. There are silos. So
Right.
we recently were driving a project where we were helping a large consumer organization um, take their social insights that their insights org had come up with and marry that with a little with their R&D data sets, which talked about products, their attributes, and their consumer tastes and preferences. And a lot of this was about the fact that internally there was no linkage between the two, and they required someone like us to come in and apply our CPG expertise to understand what the social insights are saying about the product attributes and how can you kind of cross-reference consumers liking things in very specific context, like the tests
Right.
that they run, with the social insights where they're talking on social media or showing things that they like, and with reference to a product. So, yeah,
I'm
go
amazed
ahead.
by the connections that are made. I mean, I spoke with a gentleman the other day that his whole company takes the insights that are like shopper insights and shopper timing, and pairs those with outdoor digital advertising, so that while you're on the way to the store, you see Heinz ketchup or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I'm amazed by the connections that are being made. So
No, absolutely, and the store is a very important part of this, and I think 2024 is going to be the year of the store. I know that sounds like a catchy rhyme or whatever, but the
that's
fact
a
is
big
that
prediction. Yeah.
I uh,
Okay.
I hate to say it, but I'm just following in the footsteps of giants because if you look at NRF this year, I think the
Sure.
talk of the whole event was basically that every retailer is looking at taking their retail media network and going in store with it. That's going to
Yeah.
be a huge unlock for the industry as a whole, because the moment you do that, if I'm a manufacturer, if I'm a CPG company, I'm thinking I need to be out there in front of the consumer because my competitors are already there. Whether I produce snacks, foods, beverages, anything else. Um, if I need to be out there, that means I need to allocate spend on those ads. If I need to allocate spend, I need to be able to find a way to justify that spend. And how much do I spend on which product and which brand, etc. The
Hmm.
challenge then becomes one of, can I actually quantify the return on investment? And therefore, can I actually measure how much I'm putting in and attribute some of the sales that I'm getting to this measure? And obviously, omnichannel complicates the whole journey anyway, because while someone's looking
Why
at that
not?
in
Yeah.
store ad, they're also on the phone and they click buy right there because it's easier rather than putting it into a big bag that they're carrying at that point. Or it might be the other way around. So that's where it's very, very interesting to see, to observe consumer behavior from the data, and then to learn ways in which we can allocate our ad spending to be able to derive higher ROI.
Right. So, with ad spending and driving that higher ROI, are you seeing a more intelligent consumer? Are you a more informed consumer when it comes to when people are coming back in the stores? Are they a better consumer? Are they comparing a lot across the board?
That's a very interesting point because for sure we are seeing more omni-channel customer journeys. We are
Hmm.
seeing, even from the work that we're doing, we are finding journeys originating either online and then ending up offline in the store, and vice versa as well. So the question is the customer more evolved as a shopper? I would say definitely. he or she is definitely getting um, exposed to a lot more information.
Oh yeah,
How he or she is being able to leverage that, maybe to get better deals or to be able to make choices that are more in tune with their lifestyle. I think those are honestly more open to debate, but I would say it's definitely consumers are also trying to make sense of this world where there is much more data, and
sure.
there is at the same time there is a lot of FOMO happening as well, because especially in so I remember in one of the retail clients, a very large retail client with a store presence across the US, serving about 80 million customers. Their they had a defined segment for customers called enthusiasts. I won't add the first two labels because then it'll give away the client. But
Fair
the
enough. Yeah.
enthusiasts were like the coupon stackers. They would always have like multiple coupons. They would always figure out how to use um, the
They were keyed in.
loyalty
Yeah.
money and high redeemers. So, of
Huh.
course, it opens up more opportunities for redeemers, and at the same time, it definitely makes it a bit of a challenge to exploit every opportunity as well. So, for from a consumer perspective, it just makes the world more interesting.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So you talked about huge companies, the mom and pop shop of the 800 million people, and you talked about little companies a little bit. And so, like using that lens of that operational maturity, like what is the shortest distance between realizing that you have all this data and actually unlocking
I think
it?
the
Using that
Yeah.
lens of operational maturity, whether you're a big company or a little company, is there a difference? Are there different steps?
Uh, it's definitely a very interesting comparison to set up because the most obvious one I would say is one of where you are on your journey to maturity. For a lot of It's very interesting for a company in the 10 to 20 billion dollar range. Also, the overarching challenge that we have seen is one of just ingesting the data. Their challenges are to be able to uh, take the data, be able to transform it into a common language, and link it with other data sets that they have. And you would think that this would have been solved in a large company. But the fact of the matter is that the larger you are, the more data sets you're also getting in. And so it's a constant struggle to kind of keep up with the increasingly sophisticated and increasingly larger, higher velocity data sets that you're bringing in. However, for smaller companies, the challenge is most definitely clustered around the initial part, how I can get in more data, but also to demonstrate the initial value.
Okay.
And the fact so if we look at 7 to 8 years ago, it was more about, okay, should we have an analytics organization? Should we have an insights organization? Let's just use the internal shipments data that we've been getting for 30 years. Now, obviously, even for smaller companies, that's not an option. You have to be able to start leveraging these to improve your brands and products. You have to understand the consumer so much better, and you have to be able to get your product out there to the store at the right time. So ensuring your availability on the shopper shelf is a priority. um,
Hmm. Okay.
yeah. So
So
definitely there are differences in how smaller and larger companies would try to attack the problem. I know that, for instance, some of the smaller companies may look to be particularly selective about the kind of retail data or shopper data that they can access. Those choices are going to, of course, save cost at one end, but on the other end, they might limit revenue opportunities as well for them.
okay. So given that kind of perspective, can you and your experience, have you seen like a data backed approach that made just the most transformative difference? Like maybe in the realm of CPG or retail, but where have you seen that make the most difference?
I think, Cole, the biggest difference would be if we could launch more products and have them succeed. And this is not me talking, but if you look at the Harvard Business Review, there was one statistic that about 85% of new product launches every year fail. And that is a staggering number because you're
That's
piping in all this money into innovation every
right.
day. And out of the end of the funnel, about 15% of that makes it to the market as a success. And there too, you would kind of customize your definitions of success. So the challenge, that I think is one of the biggest challenges in CPG today, where you can um, the more you put in the pipe, you want that pipe to move along quickly. And at the end of the pipe, you want it to be much, much more productive. So that 85% failure rate, if it can be brought down to 50%, 40%, you will actually see huge benefits. Now, that
It'd
is
be
where,
amazing to see that level of new products and actually new ideas moving around the world. Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
and quite frankly, it's about being able to listen to the consumer. And that is a skill. And of course, I'm using this figuratively. The skill of being able to listen to the consumer is becoming increasingly sophisticated. And that is where CPGs are always playing catch up in terms of being able to interpret. That is where, to your question, being able to link all these multiple disparate data sources together is producing a lot of value. So, if I think back to, and this is public information, of course. So, Unilever actually selected us as a partner, strategic partner in a venture that they're calling Data Lab. And Data Lab actually seeks to accelerate a lot of their digital R&D initiatives. One of the things that we're
That's smart.
helping them, yep, we're actually helping them accelerate that innovation activity and make it more productive in terms of reducing that failure rate significantly. Um, so I think a lot of the value that is going to be brought to CPG in the next 5 years, it's going to be around just being able to innovate more successfully.
That makes sense. Being able to kind of keep a hand on the rudder for those new products and new ideas.
Absolutely.
It's kind of cool. And so, with your experience, you're walking into a new client, whether it be CPG, whether it be retail, whether it be financial services. I know that you work with those as well. What are you tired of seeing when you're walking into a new customer? You could what do you just check off and say, okay, I guarantee you have these three problems. What are you seeing just as the most common across the board?
I think data silos is one big one, and you always have that challenge. I think there's no way around it. There are solutions. The second one I would say is, you know, getting uh, getting your users to really adopt the solutions that your organization has figured out that these are the solutions we need. Are they adopting it or not?
Right.
And driving that adoption is a huge challenge. And what I mean by that is there are 15 different products which different people use, but no one can kind of align on what we should use to drive it. Um, and I think the third is, um, usually the challenge that we see is there is a strategy which is defined at a fairly senior level with strategy organizations. And then by the time it needs to be actually implemented, 6 months have gone by, and some of those recommendations, now the organization's kind of wedded to approaching things in a certain way. But if you
Mm,
look at just things like generative AI, which have suddenly come around, and in the last 6 months we have seen the whole world of computing change. Now, how do
sure.
you integrate generative AI into a strategy where now you have the ability to reduce or increase developer productivity by so much because of that low code ability? You have the ability to energize your sales forces by driving much more copy generated through AI. You have the ability to influence your consumers in such a way that, if I take any online marketplace, you can now put an ad for that old camera you were trying to sell. You just need to give it like you need to click one picture of the product. It will literally generate the description for you. It will reference the barcode. It'll figure out what product it is. It'll write a nice little thing about what it's best at, the good
Sure.
features. And
Hmm.
there is your ad on eBay. So how do you take the strategy which was defined 6 months, a year ago, 2 years ago in a like multi-year transformation program, and make sure that it's flexible to be able to accommodate these path-changing innovations. That's what we definitely see a lot of organizations struggling with today.
Okay. So, do you see a difference in adoption or I guess strategy and planning between the consumer goods and the retail sector? Is and not only consumer goods and retail, but the financial sector as well. Is there a sector that's better at adopting or better at that kind of strategic thinking?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a way to kind of rank or rate this, but there are silos where not silos, but there are areas where each industry is much better at than others. So, for instance, financial services has always had a ton of data interchange and exchange. The challenge for them is becoming more about how to kind of bring in increased regulation, but without that laboring the business. And
Hmm.
in the last 2 years, we've seen the collapse of multiple banks, Signature, Silicon Valley Bank. We've seen the imposition of risk controls. We've seen questions about whether banks as an area will be able to keep up with the capital adequacy and other requirements. And for that, uh, it's becoming more and more important to interpret the same numbers in a different way. Uh, to bring in more AI to be able to predict whether we are in a situation of less risk or more risk. And of course, I'm simplifying tremendously here.
Sure.
But the
I
benefit,
appreciate that. Believe me.
not at all.
But
So I think the financial services world is much better at developing very complex AI models to solve really, really nuanced problems. Um, in CPG and retail, the the models are focused on much more pragmatic problems, such as, can I
hmm,
ensure that this product is available on the shelf tomorrow? Can I look at whether my conversion rate, if I'm an online retailer, if my conversion rate on a product is going to be increased? Can I see if my campaign will influence or will drive conversion with my set of customers incrementalities more than X%? Those are simpler to conceive as results,
right.
whereas on the risk side, in a financial services firm, the results that you're looking at, the whole environment is much more complex. And there, I think banks and other financial services institutions have the benefit of having applied, uh, having leveraged statisticians and other very mathematical talent to be able to build out models. Now, on the I think what's interesting is not just CPG, consumer, retail, and financial services, but tech is seeing an exodus into some of these other industries. And what that is doing is um, opening up new ways to think about how to apply AI to the same set of challenges that we have
Right.
tried to tackle.
So I think I might know your answer, but we're running short on time. So I've got one last question for you. So, lastly, as we look to the horizon, what trends are out there? What do you, in the way of data analytics and retail, and how should people stay ahead? What are we looking for in the horizon? I know you said 2024, year of the store. I like that, but what are we seeing on the horizon? What's going to make the difference?
I think one is we're going to start seeing some winners, some clear winners emerge as some of these more advanced approaches get applied. So, in innovation, for instance, we're going to start seeing some brands do much better than others, outperforming the market, um, and then that'll really catalyze the race to catch up. The
Hmm,
other is so innovation is definitely something I'm keeping my eyes on, and I have high hopes from that area. The second, I would say, again, if I focus on CPG and retail for a second, uh, I think we'll be able to do much more iteration on the models that. A lot more iteration around uh, testing out what works for consumers versus what doesn't, and So that will happen in the space of, let's say, ads, in the space of measurement, attribution that we spoke about. I think those are the two key things that stand out for me on CPG and retail. Um, and actually, the third one there would be, if I look at supply chain for CPG and retail, that is actually shifting now from a position where supply chain disruptions were impacting on shelf availability.
Hmm.
We got a bit better in 22 and 3. I think on shelf availability is going to become a key issue again. And I know we haven't chatted about this, but if we look at what's happening in the world today, um, there's the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, which are the Panama Canal, for instance, is seeing uh, water levels dropping. They're actually going to reduce throughput by almost a third, and
Oh,
so
wow.
where 36 vessels would pass through the canal every day, now they're going to bring that down to 24 till they solve this water situation. Even if they take 3 to 4 months to solve it, that's going to create another disruption, which will kind of that hump will kind of travel through time over the next few years. And so my prediction is on-shelf availability is going to be back on the agenda for a lot of supply chain executives.
Oof. I was hoping for good news, man. But it is something that's in the back of all of our minds, and so yeah, uh, that is some forward-looking stuff. Yeah, perfect.
Well, the good thing is now we have the lightsaber of AI to help defend us. So let's see
Fair
what we can
enough.
do with that.
Absolutely, absolutely, perfect. And so, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and link all of your information and everything else like that for you guys and LatentView. If anybody is interested in uh, actually putting their data to use, reach out to Shiraz, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. And yeah, I just want to thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of the retail corner, man.
Thank you for having me here, Cole. Always appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.